there that are said about Jesus. So,
Yeah.
and actually winded up stealing a little bit from Mark Driscoll
Oh,
from
wow.
one of his old sermons that I still had saved on one of my computers that I remembered from his vintage Jesus
How coincidental.
series. So I knew it was there. So I went back and he quoted her. I was like, oh, that looks good. So, so yeah, I wound up using that. It's funny knowing doing this, that was what we were going to do. So
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We got about 20 seconds, guys. Watching the countdown now. We actually might be live. I never really know until after. But 10 seconds. We go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome everyone to episode 65 of Kowalski Analysis. I'm your host, Rob Kowalski, and I have two friends on the show today with me.
I wound up using that. It's funny knowing doing this, that was what we were
do. Sorry. I hear that.
We got about 20 seconds.
Sorry, there it is. Sorry, guys. I was like, Mark's talking over me. Okay, guys, that's the beauty of live right there. So I'm here with two friends, pastors Matt Stutson and Mark Stitchian. Are you a pastor also, Mark?
Yeah.
You are, right?
Well, I am officially now, yeah. But if not, I'm an evangelist for the Ministry Alliance too. So.
Okay, awesome. So let's just get right into it. We're gonna go ahead and be talking about a really popular podcast that's out right now called The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. I actually had on the subject of that podcast, a guy named Pastor Mark Driscoll on a couple of weeks ago, and had some interesting conversations with my friends about that topic. And I just thought it'd be cool to bring them on and kind of chop it up together. And this podcast is going to be a little bit different than some of my other episodes because we're just going to have a conversation and we're going to kind of just talk and we're going to see where it goes. I really don't feel like I found my sweet spot with the podcast yet. Like I feel like there's something else out there for me, and I'm testing some things and exploring. And this is just going to be one of those episodes where we're just going to kind of see what happens. But hey, do me a favor, everybody, drop a comment. Let me know you're here. Say hello, say hi, say hey. If it's your first time watching, let me know where you're watching from. Let me tell you quickly about my guest, and then we're going to announce the sponsor. So I have on Pastor Matt Stutzman, who is the senior pastor of Church at Baltimore. It's a church that I was attending pretty regularly. And I have on my friend, Pastor Mark Stitchian, and he's the founder of Through God's Library Ministry. And again, I invite these two friends on and theologians so we can discuss the rise and fall of Mars Hill. And this is a conversation to discuss the issues in congregations, not to bash Pastor Mark Driscoll at all, but just to discuss those things. So let me quickly announce my sponsor and then we'll jump into the conversation. All right, fellas?
Let's do it.
Okay. I'm just going to share my screen real quick. First off, I want to announce my first sponsor, and that is Mr. Micah Hughes. Micah is a longtime friend and he does real estate. So if you want to buy, sell, or invest in real estate, give Micah a call. There's his number on the screen, 443-532-8450. He'll take good care of you. And then my other sponsor is Advisors Mortgage. And these guys have quickly become friends. They're local to the Baltimore area. A guy named Adrian White is one of their brokers and mortgage lenders. And he's a City Fan member. And they're just really good people that are backing everything that we're doing. So if you need to borrow money to buy, sell, invest in real estate, give Advisors Mortgage a call. And I'll put their information in the show notes.
Come on.
All right.
I think Micah just became a preferred vendor for Dave Ramsey, right? A preferred local provider.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Kind of legit.
Yeah. Well, he's a good dude, and he definitely takes good care of people. I mean, the guy, he really cares. It's his considers it his ministry. So let's get into it. Have you guys listened to the podcast? Have you listened to Rise and Fall of Mars Hill?
I have, yeah. I've listened to every episode and a couple of them twice. So.
Okay. All right. And Matt, you have not, right?
And he's the theologian. I haven't listened to one.
Okay, so let's talk about why or why not. So why did you not listen to the podcast, Matt?
Okay, I think that probably the reason I didn't listen to it is a really foundational kind of concept. I think I've been a pastor for 15 years. I planted a church in the inner city. And I think that probably one of the biggest reasons is because of just knowing the pain of leadership, knowing the struggle of leadership, and then listening to a lot of people talk about the podcast makes me realize, like, yeah, I'm probably too busy to actually like digest that. And so I just chose not to listen to it because, you know, not that I'm like a huge Driscoll fan either, like, but I just am like, yeah, I just don't think I have time to listen to it. It's just it's too much in my world, because I have so many people around me too. I'm from a different stream, but I have the same kind of stuff going on with the leaders that I'm a part of, you know.
Right.
Just all this, like, making podcasts against a ministry, making podcasts against leaders. And so I just was like, wow, I'm not interested. It didn't interest me. So
I love it. I mean, you know, I'm not to say that, Mark, you're wrong for listening to it, but I guess I kind of agree with what
Thanks,
you're
I appreciate
saying.
it. I'm going to leave now.
No.
Yeah, I didn't listen to it. I did listen to a couple episodes, and so obviously I had the guy on, right? And
Yeah.
I got a lot of negative feedback for having him as a guest on the show. And, you know, my thought was like, I guess it was in the same vein as what you just said, where it's like, look, what have you done? You know, like these people that are criticizing him, what have you done to know what it must have been like for him to build a 15,000 member church? You haven't done that. So like you said, that you don't have the time because you're out doing something.
Hello. And to lose a 15,000 member church.
Right.
To be locked in your house and have security and have death threats.
Right.
Like, that's crazy stuff. And we're sitting on the sidelines saying, oh, he should have done this, he should have done that. To me, it's as Christians, we've really gotten away from some of the foundational tenets. I had an interesting thing happen to me. I actually, my kids, my son's 14, my daughter's 16. We were having a meeting with some youth people, some leaders from a local church. And they asked who some of my kids' heroes were. And my son said, well, I apologize. They asked something about when they really would know or kind of mark where they got on fire for the Lord. And my son said, well, actually, it was at a meeting with, I'm forgetting his name, but the Hillsong guy in New York.
Carl Lentz.
Carl Lentz. So Carl Lentz was in town. I had gone to a leadership, event with him that night.
I-5.
Yeah, was it I-5?
I was there.
And it was open to the public that night. And Carl Lentz preached an amazing message about being filled with the Holy Spirit. And my son, I think was like maybe 12 at the time, had a real encounter with the Lord. And it was just this powerful experience for him. So he described that to them, to these youth pastors, local youth pastors. And they're like, wow, has that been really hard for you, to see what's happened to Carl Lentz? And my son said, actually, not really. He's like, I actually think that Christians treated him pretty badly.
Right.
He's like, aren't we supposed to forgive people? Aren't we?
100%.
My son's 14. I'm sitting at the table like, this is going to be an interesting conversation right now. So, and obviously he did the wrong thing. Obviously he sinned. Obviously there's problems, but how we're responding to some of this stuff is pretty interesting.
Yeah, totally acting like the people with the rocks, the woman caught in adultery. Where's the grace shown to the person?
Yeah. What does the theologian think about it, though? Come on, Mark.
Yeah, Mark, and I want to hear from you. Why did you watch it?
Yeah.
Well, so
or listen, should I say?
Listen to it. So, I graduated college, in 2002, and I was introduced to in college. I was introduced to the emergent movement.
Yeah,
like that was big going through it. So I had met Driscoll when he was back in the emergent movement. I actually took a class with him, and so I've known him and his ministry for a long period of time. And then even in the podcast, it talks about Blue Like Jazz kind of introducing him to the world. Like, I knew a little bit about him before that, and I was very fascinated with him because of his bravado, like his like, I don't care, I believe in Christ and Christ is the way mentality. And I've always kind of had that, although I'm not as out front and outspoken and everything else is him. But I believe that a lot of times Christians believe that this humility and everything else is that we pull back and we just hope somebody picks up on Christianity. So I've loved Driscoll for that. There was a lot of things that I did not like at all about what he did. And then when he kind of went, to the Calvinist bent in theology and stuff like that, I of course did not follow him in that way, but there was a couple books that he wrote that I absolutely loved. Vintage Jesus being one was pretty darn good.
Yeah.
Religion Saves, I thought, was a fantastic book. And then Doctrine, again, taking the Calvinism stuff out of it. I love the way he said, these are things that you have to believe in to be a Christian, and everything else we can kind of figure it out. So I loved his mentality. So I followed his church. I watched his sermons on a regular basis. Even though there was a lot of things that I disagreed with, I loved what he was doing when he was at Mars Hill. So knowing what happened, I didn't know anything about the podcast till Rob, you and I went and sat and that Saturday. And I literally, like, that weekend wasn't a good weekend for me. Sunday, I started listening to it because of what you said, because, of everything that happened. And I was fascinated with the story. I was fascinated with, hey, this is what church is like. And again, I planted a church. I planted a church in Southern Baltimore in 2008, and ran for 3 years before I stepped down and turned it over to somebody else. So like, I'd been there and done those type of things too, and I'm possibly looking to do it in the future. So I was very interested, and I'm very, very still interested in the way that he started a church, because he did it with pride. Like he did everything he did with pride. Like he may have been misstepping, I think, from my end, the get off the bus or we're going to run you over and the male chauvinist stuff. But and of course, all the William Wallace stuff and everything else. And if you've listened to the podcast, you understand all that. But he did it because he believed that God was, what he believed in God was the right way. So moving forward, I loved the podcast from a different angle than you, Matt. I loved it because I thought it shows you where to go. Now it shows you how he messed up and everything else and all that comes along with it. But there was a lot in there of the background that I didn't know. I didn't know what he was doing, and there were some things that I caught on to that I thought was absolutely was great. Like, I love that his open forum was called the Midrash and stuff like that, having a Jewish background, and my background's in biblical theology and ancient Jewish culture and history, like that was, I was like, that's awesome. Like, so there were certain things in it that I thought were very good from a church world. Like, if you've been in the church world a lot, there's a lot of stuff in it that you pick up on that you're like, that's pretty darn interesting in the way that he did it. Again, I watched one of his sermons. I just told you guys this, but I'll say it again. I watched one of his sermons this past weekend, had nothing to do with this podcast, just because I remembered there was something in a sermon that I wanted to go back and hear. I can still learn from him. Like you were talking about Carl Lentz. It's funny that I-5 message, I live right here by I-5 and was attending I-5 at the time when Carl Lentz came and preached that message when they had their leadership conference. I was in Hillsong, New York, the Sunday before that. I think it was a Tuesday night, and he preached the same message. And I remember sitting there, I left with the person that I was with going, wow, that was powerful. And then he preached the same message again. And I was like, that's still very powerful. Like, that was such a good message. And again, I liked Carl Lentz. I liked some of his messages. Didn't like all of them, just like Driscoll, but it to me, I listened to it because it's also things that might run into from people that aren't Christians. So I want to have, if it's this big cultural thing, I want to at least have an answer for it. So that was one of the reasons that I talked about it. Actually, some of my, I'm Bible teacher at a school. So I've had a couple kids say, have you listened to this since? So I also have the ability to kind of talk to them. That's why I've listened to a couple extra ones, because they were like, hey, listen to this again, because I didn't catch on to what they were saying. Right.
I don't think there's anything wrong with listening to it, honestly, because I've listened to a couple episodes and I may even go back and listen to all of them because it is very well done. I think I think it's what people do with it after they listen, because when people were reaching out to me, they're like, I can't believe you're having this guy on your show. Don't you know what he's done? Like somehow your identity is the worst act that you've ever done, even if it's true, whatever they're saying, which is a whole nother issue, because it's like, he didn't get fired. That was the crazy thing. He stepped down. He left. They came to him and wanted him to get some like therapy or help or whatever. And then he stepped down on his own. So I'm like, he built a church from 0 to 15,000 people in Seattle of all places.
Wow.
I'm like, so we have to look at like, well, he did a heck of a lot of good stuff too. And even if he did that thing, he's not like he's beyond redemption. And that's what the thing.
There's still people that are being ministered to by his, like now, like not even with the church he's at in Arizona. Like there's still people that are being ministered by the stuff that was done at that church. So, there's a lot of good that came out of that. There's also a lot of bad probably for the people that are there too.
Right.
What would
Yeah. Thousands of people probably met Jesus through his work, What were you going to say, Matt?
Well, I was just going to ask, what's some of the high level like accusation? Like why did they make a podcast?
Yeah. What was the worst things that he did? Because people said he sexualized, one girl said he sexualized women. I saw the clip that they used in the intro of the podcast where he was like saying, "Who in the hell do you think you are?" And he was sticking up for women in that.
Yes. So that was, and they go into it that, he had multiple services and he did that. And he said it was of the Spirit. The big thing with him that I never got on board with. And again, I'm not a Calvinist by any means. And if either of you are, that's fine. No hard feelings. Let's just be honest. Anybody listening, if you're a Calvinist, like I've worked at a PCA church at one point, and not been a Calvinist. So taking that aside, the basically that women were below men. And I think the Bible is the most progressive book there's ever been written for its time. The way that he treated women, there was a lot of, you have to be at home making babies, cooking meals, and let your husband do the work, type mentality. There was a lot of that. The stuff from the early years from their forums, where he was writing as William Wallace II, and saying some pretty evil things towards women, towards, some men that don't want to step up and do things, towards, the gay community and stuff like that. All little more accepting in the 90s, but still not good. And when they came out, that was an explosion. When it came out that he was the author behind William Wallace, I remember that happening when it kind of broke on the blogosphere. That was pretty hard. And then the stuff where he starts taking over the leadership and he starts to kind of push the people out that have something to say to him. And his basically ego is what ran him out the door, right? Like he had said, like he wouldn't like take on a mentor in like John Piper, because John Piper's church wasn't as big as his. And again, John Piper's, whatever you think about him and his theology, John Piper has been there and done that. Like he would have been a great mentor for somebody. Even if you don't believe him, in the sermon you heard me speak 2 weeks ago, I quoted John Piper, and I'm not a John Piper guy.
I get where you're going with it, but to me, all those things, they all seem kind of flimsy. Say abuse, abuse. I'm like, people could accuse me of abuse. Like, honestly, when you're running an organization, anyone can accuse you of anything. And there might even be a little bit of justification for it, because sometimes building something is stressful, and maybe you said something wrong to somebody once. I don't know. It wasn't like he cheated on his wife or, it was kind of all flimsy. It seemed like to me. Maybe I don't know enough about it.
Yeah, it's really there. I mean, it's really documented, and that's the satellite view of that. And that's not even the whole buying the book and selling the book, and then all the plagiarism problems that he ran into as well too, where he was getting caught plagiarizing in some of his books. And then of course, his church in Acts 29, his church planting ministry, buying his book to try to get him onto the New York Times bestsellers list, which is, they kind of try to justify it a little bit, but it seems like fraud to me. And that was the way that it kind of played out back in '06 or whenever that happened.
Mm.
So there was all this stuff that was building up onto it, and then the stuff that he's doing, and he's putting people down, he's kicking people out the door that is not with him, in an unhealthy way, telling people that if you don't do this, you're going to get fired, and just forcefully doing stuff, to kind of share it. And that's kind of, I don't know the breakdown of everything. So that's kind of the overview of what happened.
Yeah.
The one thing that hurt me the most, to be honest with you, and it's probably one thing that people pass by, he was doing videos over in some third world country or someplace in Jerusalem, Turkey, something like that, whatever. And his film crew, like, they pulled up to a place with his film crew, and it was like this big lush place. And they were like, wow, we're going to get to sleep here. And he was like, no, I am. And they had to go to like some place where they couldn't, like, he made the film crew go everywhere else,
Right.
And as a leader, to me, that broke my heart, because I believe that as a leader should be, from behind, and should never, take the seat of honor. So that was one of the things that hurt me the worst.
That's not unlike pastors getting the parking spot right by the door. Like that's pretty typical, right? It seems like to me. But I mean, I guess the thing is like, if he didn't step down, would any of this have happened?
Yeah, he would.
Right?
I think he would have got fired.
Yeah, because they said, the one episode I did hear, I think I only heard the first two. They said no one expected him to quit.
Yeah,
they didn't think that would happen, and he, of course, he probably did have some pride issues, and just was like, screw it, he thought he was above reproach, and he just left. But I guess the bigger question here is like, what do you do with that? Like, so even like Carl Lentz, clearly wrong, but the way he was treated and the widespread across, I think I've heard on one of the reality shows or like Entertainment Tonight, that Justin Bieber like unfriended him, or, like, I'm like, all that he did for that kid, and he screws up, and then you're like, you leave him when he's at his lowest moment. It seems very not Christ-like to me.
It's tough.
What do you think, Matt?
Don't make a mistake.
Right, exactly. Where's the grace?
Don't make a mistake. Yeah. Well, I think that we're just too soft. We're too soft on sin, and we're too soft on that. Like, Jesus was so absolute. I mean, to the point of actually sacrificing himself. So on the cross, I mean, we're so weak. And I say we, like, I'm not saying that like, oh, bashing Christians, but like, we're really hard. It's hard for us to forgive. It's hard for us, it's really difficult. And I think that that's a huge problem. Like, we love sociality, and it's hard for us to forgive people. And I don't think it's the way of Jesus.
Right.
I mean, Jesus standing there with that woman, like you said, at the well, she's, and somehow Jesus breaks through that stuff. He breaks through, well, you've had 5 husbands, and the one you're with right now is not your husband, just outrageous stuff. And yet he still loves them so intensely that their lives change. And
Right.
So I don't know where we're at in that. And I mean, I've had many opportunities to love people like that. And I can't say that I've won every time, for sure. But I think there's something to be said about a lifestyle, and like radical, outrageous grace that's provided from Jesus. And we're supposed to emulate that, or we've received it. Like, I'm a product of that grace, like, of unconditional acceptance, right? And yet it's really difficult for me to actually provide that for other people.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to the verse about removing the plank from your eye before you worry about the speck in your brother's eye. It's like,
Yeah,
we can be so critical of other people and not look at ourselves, and remember, like, I don't know. It's really sad, actually, to think that's how the overall church is, why the larger body is in general is like that, where they just kind of cast you aside. I had a friend, many of you guys know Jess Boja. Well, I don't know if you know him, Matt, but Mark, you know him. Mm-hmm. And he got caught in a scandal a few years ago. And was a pastor of a church, and he was on City Fam's board, and I had no idea about it. And when it came out, like everybody rejected him. And he had done so much in his community in Havre de Grace. He had done all kinds of stuff for families, really loved people, but he screwed up bad. And everybody just turned on him. And I was like, I pulled him close, and it came back on me because people was not happy that I befriended him.
Yeah.
But I'm like, what would Jesus do? You know, like, I never condoned his sin. I never told him it was okay or he was right. But I thought there was a chance he was going to go one of two ways. He's either going to be like, screw it, and go like his heart was going to get hardened, or he might, you know, get himself together. And I wanted to do my part to make sure that he tried to bounce back and learn from his mistakes. But man, yeah, I definitely think we're getting it wrong in that department.
Yeah. I think we become so like, it's this weird thing where we're not, like, we're so afraid that if we accept people, we won't be able to hold like a really holy or spiritual standard. But I don't know, but you look at the life of Jesus, it wasn't that way for him. I mean, he had an intense standard of purity and love and a righteous life, and yet that propelled him towards people that were not right. And somehow our way of life, or our Christian, the version of Christianity we have, is like, well, I've got a little bit of righteousness, a little bit of holiness, so I need to like get away from you. Like, I need to not associate with you because there's something wrong with you. Like, you did something wrong, and so I'm going to pull away. So there's something unusual. I mean, I remember just coming upon that verse in Mark, where I think it's Mark 9, where they're telling Jesus, like, hey, we saw these guys casting out demons, and we told them to stop because they're not with us. And Jesus said, don't tell them to stop. If they're not against us, they're for us. And that really rocked me. Like, I was like, wow, that's an inclusive kind of perspective, where I'm waiting for people to join me. And Jesus is saying, if they're not rejecting me, they're already for me.
No.
And I'm like, man, that's not the way I feel about life. That's not the way I feel about Jesus. That's not the way I feel about, you know. And yet Jesus' perspective was like, hey, hold on, don't tell them not to. If they're not against us, they're running with us. So that's inclusion kind of perspective. That's pretty intense, but it's so dangerous. It's so scandalous to live like that.
It's only dangerous because people make it that way, right? Like, it's not really, you know, and I talk about this often. We tend to like to call out sins that we don't commit. There's a lot of times in Paul where there's like 5 sins listed, but we always say is that homosexuality is wrong. Yeah. But then, we miss gluttony and whatever, Shane Claiborne, who has been instrumental in my faith, some of his writings and stuff like that, posted online. I believe it was yesterday or the day before. Don't ask me if I'm a Christian, ask the poor around me. If I am. And again, some of his writings, his first book is the reason I started my church. Like, it started a homeless ministry nonprofit. Like, I read that and went, yeah, I'm probably not doing enough. Like that was me. Like, but yeah. Again, it's that idea that we like to justify ourselves because I don't do X, Y, and Z. I don't do this, that, and the other. I've had, and to be completely real, I've had people tell me that I'm not a Christian because the person that led me to the Lord was gay. I've had people literally say, well, we need to pray, so you can accept Jesus into your heart for real. Like, I'm like, yeah, no, like that's not the case. It's just big, but it's something that they don't struggle with or they don't understand or whatever. And so they push it out and push it to the side. We do that with everything. And again, looking at what Driscoll did, he did a lot of real good stuff. And some of his writings are really good. Like, if you have never read some of them, like I suggest you go read them. And I'm a big reader. So of course I'm going to be saying, read a book. But like, there is some really good stuff he did. And some of his sermons are fantastic. And they're still reaching people today. It's still something that, but when you mess up there, sometimes you also have to pay the penalty, right? Like it's, you know, in the Jewish mindset, it's we were slaves in Egypt when we were wandering through the desert, when we sinned like Adam and Eve, right? Like, so it's not that Adam and Eve sinned back then and caused original sin. It's that we make that choice every day. It's us in that principle. We have to take those timeless truths. But when we start to say, well, we're good, we have Jesus, and we don't look at it as we have culpability in our actions, you know, that's when somebody who's doing a 15,000 person church says, well, I'm bigger than somebody that has a 5,000 person church. And that's total pride. That's total, you know, arrogance.
Yeah.
You know,
did y'all ever see the clip with Mel Gibson or with Robert Downey Jr. and Mel Gibson?
No,
I'm going to show it. Actually, that's really good. So this is, I don't know how long it was after Mel's meltdown when, you know, the DUI and all the anti-Semitic, and he was completely toxic in Hollywood at the time, like to be near him. And Robert Downey Jr. was given this award, a very prestigious award, and he could choose anybody that he wanted to give it to him. And I'll show you the clip. It's really cool. Let's see if we, hopefully there's not a commercial.
This is Mongolia.
Oh, sorry guys.
And we are the only company in the world who's created a premium 100% cashmere sweater for just $75.
Get some sweaters while we're at it.
yeah, it's Cyber Monday, right?
Actually, I asked Mel to present this award for this reason, because when I couldn't get sober, he told me not to give up hope, and he urged me to find my faith. Didn't have to be his or anyone else's, as long as it was rooted in forgiveness.
Can y'all hear that?
It's pretty quiet, but I can't hear it.
Let me see if I can get a louder version of it. Let me see. Hold on one second. Looks like it might be it. Yeah, unfortunately, it looks like it's it. Sorry.
No worries.
Loud as it's going to
Actually, I asked Mel to present this award to me for a reason, because when I couldn't get sober, he told me not to give up hope, and he urged me to find my faith. Didn't have to be his or anyone else's, as long as it was rooted in forgiveness. And I couldn't get hired, so he cast me in the lead of a movie that was actually developed for him. And he kept a roof over my head, and he kept food on the table. And most importantly, he said that if I accepted responsibility for my wrongdoings, if I embraced that part of my soul that was ugly, hugging the cactus, he calls it. He said that if I hugged the cactus long enough, I'd become a man of some humility, and that my life would take on a new meaning. And I did, and it worked. All he asked in return was that someday I help the next guy in some small way. It's reasonable to assume that at the time he didn't imagine the next guy would be him. Or that someday was tonight. So anyway, on the special occasion and in light of the recent holidays, including Columbus Day, I humbly ask that you join me, unless you are completely without sin, in which case you picked the wrong industry, in forgiving my friend his trespasses, offering him the same clean slate you have me, and allowing him to continue his great and ongoing contribution to our collective art without shame. He's hugged the cactus long enough.
How much like Jesus is that, man?
Legit.
Like he totally took a bullet for the guy.
Yeah.
And I love that scene, man. It's just, that's why Robert Downey Jr. is one of my favorite actors, just because of that. It really feels like it's like the sheeple mentality, the herd mentality, you know, to kick somebody when they're down. It's just so easy to do, man. Like, remember when Ray Rice got caught? You remember Ray Rice of the Raven?
Yeah.
I actually knew Ray, and he was a really good guy, regardless of what happened. But man, people were out like burning his jerseys, and I'm like,
yeah,
I don't know. Thought, if you want to go do something for battered women, go volunteer. But like anybody can kick a guy when he's down. It's just anyway, man. Well, I've enjoyed talking to you guys. This was good. So I was going to tell you about what I'm doing with home, Matt. I might as well go into it because we got a little time, got a few minutes. So about home, obviously. So I heard Gary Vee say this thing about musicians. He said rather than give your money, get money from a record label, he's like, you could take your album art, make it into NFTs, tokenize it, and then sell it to your fans, and then give them 20% of the royalties. And instead of giving 80%, you only getting 20, they get 20, you get 80. Yeah. So when he said that, it was the first time that I thought, wow, they actually can earn money off of this. It's more like an investment thing. So then I Googled tokenization. I went to YouTube, but tokenization of real estate. And there was all these videos that popped up. So I was on a phone call with somebody last Friday, and they were telling me the process. And it's basically like an IPO, an initial public offering, but instead of stock, it's tokens. And why that's better is because it's less expensive. You don't need all the lawyers and brokers and all the other stuff, and they can trade them peer to peer a lot easier. And it's smaller investment, fractionalized, so people can invest maybe $1,000 and they can have a certain amount of tokens, and they can earn money off of those tokens based on how well the business does. So I'm really pumped about it. I'm moving forward with it.
There's gonna be you're gonna have a home crypto.
Yeah, we're gonna do it. It's called an STO, a security token offering.
That's awesome.
And we're going to use that as to raise the money to buy the building, open the place, hire the person to run it, and the city fan members are going to be the ones to own home, which is so much better than anything I could have thought of. I was talking to a friend of mine about it the other day, and I was like, so God told me this idea about home 19 years ago. I didn't have all the details back then, but he told me about the building. He said, one day you're going to be in this building, you're going to be doing something outside the box, people are going to come from all over the world to see it. And in the last 19 years, there's been multiple times where the door has been cracked for me to go through it. And it was, I liken it to like when David was in the cave and Saul came in to relieve himself. And it was like, it was there, and it was like tempting to go for it, but I could tell it wasn't God. And I said, no, I just took my hands back and I just waited, as uncomfortable as it was. And it's like, I was praying the other day to God, and I said, God, when you show up, it's got to be so good and so brilliant and so right that it makes the wait worth it. Cause it was a long wait.
Yeah.
And this STO, I think, is it, man. Cause I'm like, it was just this idea that I'd never even heard of. I didn't even think about the members being able to own it. And them, and so now I've actually started making a list. I've actually reached out to Mitchell Easton. He was a guy on my podcast. He's an influencer. And I'm like, look, he's a Christian guy. He's a virgin. And I'm like, I want to give you some tokens just to talk about it. So like, I want to try to reach out to like Kanye, and, Diddy and whoever else, Bieber. I don't know if we can get to him, but if we could, I mean, when I was talking to the guy, this guy was in South Africa that worked for this company. He's like, he was a Christian too. And he said, it's going to be huge. He goes, I can already see it. And so I'm really excited about it, man. I think 2022 is going to be the year it opens.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
So super excited about it.
Yeah. Let me buy one.
Oh yeah. Sure. You'll have a chance to get it. I want you involved. Shoot, we might even have some church at Baltimore services there.
Come on. That sounds good to me.
So, all right, fellas. Well, this was great, man. I appreciate y'all coming on, spending some time with me, chopping it up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely.
I'll see you guys soon. Matt will be working out Wednesday, right?
All right. Yes, we will.
He's like, damn it, you got me on public. Got me on air. I got to commit. All right. Cool, man.
All right.
All right.
See you guys.